Ready to come to the stage? We have the creator of Zombie Cage Fighter. His name is Quarry, everybody.
Thank you. That's me. And I am a Salem resident. This is where I grew up at. Graduate of North Salem High. So if there's any Saxons here, you can get the hell out. That's how we roll. Comic books have had a major part of my life. I didn't have the most ideal childhood, and I would escape into these worlds. This cover here, X Factor #1. When I was in middle school, 7th, 8th grade, going to Walker Middle School, if it's still there in West Salem, every day I would walk home and I would stop at 7-Eleven, back when they used to have comic books there on the little stand that would turn around, and I saw this X Factor #1 for $1.25. And man, I could not afford $1.25. So I took it into the back of the store and I hid it in the peachy folders. And then I went out on the hunt like we did back then, looking for cans and bottles everywhere I could find them, until probably 2-3 weeks later, I had my $1.25. And I bought that copy of X Factor #1 that I still have, and I ran home. And I remember exactly where I was in the house. I was laying down on the floor, on the carpet in my room, reading this book, and it was so overwhelming for me, because it took me out of the world that I was in and displaced me into someplace else where there was heroes, and they were fighting for righteousness. They were fighting for the good fight. And you had, in that issue, you had these mutants who were picked on. They were the outcasts. And well, that was me. I was the outcast at my school. I was raised in a cult. I wasn't allowed to do any sports, have any friends at school, anything like that. So here I am looking at these mutants saying, well, that's me. That's how I feel. And here's these heroes fighting for these guys. And at the end of the day, the heroes won. And it took me out of where I was in my world and brought me into something else. And then I find this Marvel 2-in-1 annual for The Thing. And it's really, if you've ever read this story, it's probably one of the most ludicrous stories you can ever imagine. It's so ridiculous that Dexter's Laboratory did an episode based completely on that. This issue is the intergalactic boxing champ comes to Earth to find out if Earth has any heroes worthy of stepping into the ring with him. And if not, he's going to destroy the Earth. Because if you can't box, well then what the hell good is your planet? So one by one, all of these superheroes step into the ring to face the intergalactic boxer. And the Hulk, who was always my favorite, rips off his gloves and charges across the ring, and the intergalactic boxer just says, no, you have to follow the rules. This is a sporting, this isn't just a knockdown, drag out, knuckle dragon fight. We have rules here. Thor steps in, can't get rid of his hammer while he's cheating too. Other guys just get blasted over and over and over again. And the reason why this story means so much to me was because in my early 20s, that's when I discovered the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And I was such a huge fan of martial arts movies and all those types of things, although I was never allowed to do anything like that. In my early 20s, I was at a party, and this guy comes up to me and says, man, there's these two guys beating the hell out of each other in a cage on TV. And I thought to myself, well, that just sounds ridiculous. Who would choose to get punched in the face for money in this day and age? Get a real job. And then I go inside and I see two of the classic UFC warriors, Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie, duking it out. And I was so taken aback by the skill that they had, by the athleticism that they showed, and then the honor and respect that they showed each other at the end of the bout. And I realized this isn't violence. This is a sporting event. This is skill. And I want to try that. So I said, I'm going to completely quit living my life the way that I have been. For the first time in my life, I'm going to do what I want to do. And that's why I have this big phoenix tattooed on my shoulder here. Because I had to be reborn to a new way of life. And so I open up the phone book and I find a local gym here in Salem. Go down there, start training. My first night of practice was an hour and a half of kickboxing and an hour and a half of grappling or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And they beat the crap out of me so badly, I was sick for 3 days after that. But I said, as I was leaving, to myself, not to them, that's for sure, I'm going to keep coming back here every week until I can beat your asses. And that's what I did. I just kept training over and over and over again. And I remember the very day, the first time I tapped out my main coach. And I started taking fights. At 26, I took my first fight, just a small amateur show up in Vancouver in a warehouse someplace. I had no idea who I was going to fight. I ended up winning in 2.5 minutes, didn't even get hit. Same thing with my fights. I just kept going and going and going until finally I got the call from the UFC to be a part of the Ultimate Fighter. And for me, this was so far beyond anything that I had ever even conceived of that it was just beyond me. But going and being on the Ultimate Fighter, which is basically you take 16 idiots who choose to get punched in the face for a living, lock them in a house and see who the toughest guys are at the end of it. And it is horrific. It is such a ridiculous time. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Sitting around talking with fighters about fighting for 7 weeks as we filmed this thing, never knowing who you were going to fight. Could be the very next day you get called to fight your training partner. It was ridiculous. But as I started fighting for the UFC, I brought this issue with me to every one of my fights. And I would read it over and over and over again. And I was never a huge fan of the Thing, just never really related to him. I really liked the Hulk because he had this inner rage. He was this calm, intelligent guy until things really pissed him off. And then everything went to hell. But with the Thing, he was just a rocky guy type of thing. But once I read this story, he's the only one that could face off, once again, this completely ludicrous story. He's the only one that could face off against the intergalactic boxer because he understood the rules and he wanted to go in there and he was going to fight hard no matter what it was. And I would read this over and over again the week of the fight because as I would read this story, I would say, this is the fighter that I want to be. Because right here on this panel, the intergalactic boxer has hammered the Thing so hard. He flies up in the air, crashes down into the ring. The referee steps in and stops the fight, says, you won't last another round, we've got to stop this fight. And the Thing crawls back into the ring. And he says, you claim to have won, but you haven't beat me. You'll never beat me. You'll have to break me. You'll have to destroy me before you'll get me to quit. And the intergalactic boxer looks at him and says, I realize that. I could break your body, I could break your bones. I will never break your heart. I will never break your spirit. Because the earth has spawned one such as you, I shall spare the earth. And it reminded me over and over again, this is how I want to live my life. This is how I want to fight. That you can beat me, you can break me, no matter what it is. I will crawl back into the ring. You will have to force my body to quit because you'll never break my heart. And these comics just resonated with me so much as the fighter that I wanted to be, as the man I wanted to be, as the father that I wanted to be, that it just became a portion of my life. And as I kept training and kept fighting, and there it is. There's the moment. A world that could spawn one such as you is truly the worthiest of all. In the Dexter's Laboratory version, it was the intergalactic wrestler played by Macho Man Randy Savage versus the little monkey, which made it even better. You got to Google it. It's amazing. But in my journey then, people started asking me, well, what's your story? Where did you come from? We want you to write a biography. And I just had no interest in sitting down and writing the Rocky story over and over and over again. Guy comes from a crappy background, knocks some people out, goes out for steak. It's been done. Marky Mark's probably working on a new version of it right as we speak. So I sat down and I started thinking about my journey and where I came from, what my motivations were to fight. And I knew I had to make this into a comic book. I had to put some flavor into it to bring that to life that's been so big a part of who I am. So I created Zombie Cage Fighter. And it is a biographical horror story of my life. What I've gone through, what I've seen and done as a fighter and as a father. I just threw in zombies, just for the flavor of it. But it's not really about that. This was another huge influence on me, Lone Wolf and Cub. And to me, this was what me and my little girl went through. For so many years, we were just by ourselves. And every once in a while, I'd come up and I'd give her a hug and I'd say, well, Daddy's going away for a week. When I come back, we'll either celebrate or you'll watch me heal on the couch. And that was just a part of her life. But I felt just like in Lone Wolf and Cub, where you have a man out there against the world pretty much by himself, but with this sidekick along with him, making the journey more difficult to be sure, but also making it more worthwhile, giving you something to fight for. That just related to me so much more that I have the entire collection of Lone Wolf and Cub, and you would have heard me squeal like a little girl when I realized there was the new Lone Wolf and Cub series that Dark Horse is presenting, so I was pretty happy to see that. But as I sat down and started to write my story, I thought back to the adventures I've had, the things that I've seen and done, and I looked at my life and I said, I feel like in some ways I've been ridiculously fortunate. When it was the big fight that really mattered, when I showed up with all the money I had in the world in my pocket, and I knew we were fighting for food money, I'd have the mortgage statement in my bag with me, knowing if I lose this fight, we lose the house. And it just motivated me so much more to put that effort into it. And over again, it worked out. I would land that one big punch right when it counted. Or the other guy would land that big punch and it would almost put me out, but not quite. And I was able to keep on fighting. And to be sure, I've had my share of losses. I've been brutally knocked out, brutally TKO'd, submitted, lost by decision. I've lost every way you possibly can in the MMA world. But for me, that was just a part of the journey, part of what I'm going through as a person, as a father, as a fighter. So as I sat down to write Zombie Cage Fighter, they always say, write what you know, and that's what I did. I wrote about my life, where I'd come from. Only in Zombie Cage Fighter, my character never quite gets over the hump. And it's me. It's based on my life, as I've said. It's my daughter. It's based on people I know. So the character is Nate Rock Quarry in it. I always refer to him as Rock to have that separation as I'm talking about myself. And Rock has never quite made it over that. He's still fighting in the small shows, way past his prime, late into his 40s, still with a little girl he's trying to take care of. And he goes and takes one more fight, based on, back in my days, fighting at the Roseland Theater up in Portland. Takes one more fight there and can't even get halfway through the first round before a young up-and-comer knocks him out. And the promoter says, you're done. It's time for you to hit the road. We've got no more use for you. And as he's walking out, he runs into another promoter that says, hey, I've got something that might be of interest to you. You're not making 2 nickels here, but I'll pay you if you're willing to put a little bit more on the line. And he gets introduced to the underground zombie cage fights. Because every zombie movie you ever see is always post-apocalypse. 6 billion zombies and a handful of survivors. Well, somewhere between now and that inevitable zombie apocalypse, zombies are going to be more of a nuisance, more of a political liability. There's going to be this transition, and that's where my character is at. We're seeing the decay of civilization, and he's still scrapping, trying to find a way to provide for his little girl to make sure that she doesn't have a life like he has. And that's been my story over and over again. What am I fighting for? To give my daughter a better life. And I've been so fortunate to find just incredible artists. Blair Butler helped me write this story from G4. Omi came in and did the cover for me. There's so many people that came together. Peter Starwalt did the interior pages. Because I can see it in my mind, and I'll go to my artists and I'll tell them, this is what I want. I want to be landing a big haymaker to a zombie. Make that happen. And they'll bring my ideas to life, and it's the most incredible thing. For me, that was one of my keys to success in fighting. I ask a lot of questions, and I'm not afraid to look stupid. And my last question is always the same. What should I be asking that I'm not smart enough to even know to ask? And I get that information. I get to where I want to be and where I need to be. Now, this issue that I did in 2012, and if y'all go to zombiecagefighter.com, give me your email address so I can spam the hell out of you, you can get a free PDF of the comic. But what that really means as well is this summer, when I launch the 6-issue miniseries that's going to tell this whole story, you'll be first in line to get it. And it's the same thing now. I'm working with some incredible creators who are helping my vision to come to life. My interior artist, my colorist, my cover artist, Alex Horley, who's very, very similar to a Frank Frazetta style. And he came to me and he said, I like your style. I want to work with you. I want to be a part of your book. And that's what I can say over and over again is how fortunate I've been to be living my dream how difficult the journey's been and how worthwhile it's been the entire time. So comics has been just a huge part of my life. I've got 6 long boxes at home. I had 12 when I had to quit my job 13 years ago. I sold half of my collection so I could feed my family, but I'm getting it back. That's always the dream. So thank you very much. Go to zombiecagefighter.com, get your copy as well, and I'll have stickers, and I brought comics too. So thank you.
David Quarry, everybody. That's awesome.